beautiful thing when it sort of works, you know? Love it. So, a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into today. Just first of all, sorry for the flurry of emails. I'm realizing for the online folks, I want to make sure that you always have the handout. And I don't have the handout until the day I'm teaching. So just getting into the rhythm of, on Tuesdays, look for an email from me. And normally I will be sending out like kind of a summarizing, this is what we did and here's what's coming up, earlier than I did this week. And Joichi, I guess, is the video, is that something that people can?
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll try to keep the email clutter to a minimum, but in the tech kind of materials realm, is it kind of working for folks? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. Good. Let me know if it isn't. Okay? So don't sit on that. If it isn't working, just let me know so that I really, this is the first time I've really tried, the teaching I've done has all been it's never been hybrid before, and I'm just really acutely aware of how many ways there are that we can feel like we're falling through the cracks. So, okay, just stay connected to me. Is there anything else before we dive in that people are wondering about or? Okay, so I'm turning now to this handout, the Taking Sides handout. So let me set the scene. And if anyone watched the TV show The Good Place? Yes. Yeah, okay, so if you've watched the TV show The Good Place, you've already heard of the trolley problem. It's incredibly how many TV shows are there that both have, who's the main actor, Kristen Bell, and modern lessons in ethics? Like, who does that? Insanity. So the trolley problem is I think it started out I think it was first articulated in the 60s, but it became a thing in the 70s. Oh, okay. And it is a problem in what is a field of ethics known as meta-ethics, where you're like wondering about how do we make ethical decisions? Not just like what types of decisions do we make, or is something good or not good, but like the big picture, like how does it even work? And it's part of the thinking about and I know I've given you a handout, so now you're reading the handout, but don't read the handout! Resist the urge! So it's part of the kind of thinking around the trolley problem, and the essay, if any of you dived into it, I don't know if you did, but it's a part of this world in thinking about ethics, where people are setting forward these hypothetical situations in order to kind of test and refine our intuition, our moral intuition. That's a really interesting thing to do, that like the assumption here is that we actually do have a moral intuition, like that we sort of know something. And then it's kind of like this world of philosophizing and ethics thinking. It's a little bit like linguistics, where you're kind of, here's this language, and you're seeing how it's used, and you're talking about like, what do actual language speakers do? And then you're kind of looking at that and kind of deducing the rules that must be governing that behavior. So it's sort of an interesting thing where like any kind of ethical rules that are derived from this kind of exploration are coming from our investigation of what we actually do. So there's an assumption here that we have an intuition, and that when we explore that intuition, we can actually figure out norms or rules that underlie it. It's a very optimistic view of human behavior, right? That we have an intuition we can trust, and that it's kind of rational, right? So, but that assumption, which is baked into how predominantly Western philosophizers and ethicists think about it, that assumption, both that we have something in our gut that tells us, sort of prompts us how to act, and that we can refine the logic of it, that thinking is actually also baked into the way Buddhism thinks about ethics, in ways that are tied to what we were talking about last week, tied to bodhicitta, to this thought of awakening. There's something, I just want to foreground the profoundly optimistic view of human nature that's at stake with even the activity of thinking about how we make moral decisions. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like it's like optimistic. Mm-hmm. That plays? Okay. So let me set the scene. And I'll set the scene by actually just reading the top two passages, the one numbered 4 and number 5 on the handout. Okay? So they're different versions of the same dilemma. David is a great transplant surgeon. 5 of his patients need new parts. One needs a heart. The others need, respectively, liver, stomach, spleen, and spinal cord. Look how detailed this example is. The devil lies in the details with this sort of thing. So they all need these different parts, but all are of the same relatively rare blood type. By chance, David learns of a healthy specimen with that very blood type. David can take the healthy specimen's parts, killing him, and install them in his patients, saving them. Or he can refrain from taking the healthy specimen's parts, letting his patients die. Okay? That's the first example. I love these, so this philosopher who wrote this essay, it's like so gory, you got to love the kind of willingness to dive into these details. Second example, and this is where the phrase the trolley problem comes from. Edward is the driver of a trolley whose brakes have just failed. On the track ahead of him are 5 people. The banks are so steep that they will not be able to get off the track in time. The track has a spur leading off to the right. Edward can turn the trolley onto it. Unfortunately, there is one person on the right-hand track. Edward can turn the trolley, killing the one, or he can refrain from turning the trolley, killing the 5. Okay, so in both examples, both David and Edward, you have 1 life can be taken, 5 lives are saved in that action. Okay, so what do you guys think about these 2 scenarios?
I think it's really strange.
Whoa, what? Hold on, not all ones, yeah.
I think it's really strange that I have an immediate reaction where I feel like I know what the answer is to each one.
Okay, so what's the answer?
I feel like in the first one, you have to let the,
The 5 healthy.
Yeah, the 5 die and the 1 live. And in the second one,
you have to let the 5 die, or you have to let the 5 live.
Yeah. In the first one.
Oh, sorry. The 5. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
5.
The
Gotcha.
the 5 die and the 1 live, and in the second one, you let the 1 live and the 5 die. And that's just like my immediate. Oh no.
So.
No, the second one.
You kill the 1. Yeah.
Yeah, kill the 1 and the 5 live. Sorry. It's confusing, but it's odd how my spiritual.
So.
It's an immediate response to that. I didn't really have to even think about it.
You didn't have to think about it. Okay. Does everyone agree with Robert's decision making?
Yeah.
Yeah. Really?
I'd say.
What? No. Okay.
Well,
wait.
They're 2 different problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, they're 2 different. Okay. All right.
No.
Not everyone speak at once. Let's go to the Zoom person. Was that Louise? No, who was it on the Zoom?
It was me.
Okay, speak up, and then we'll go to James. Is that Everly? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Everly. Okay, so this is not my first time encountering these problems, so I always complicate it in my head. It's hard for me to keep it simple, but keeping it simple, I would say my gut says to let the 1 die, period, and save the 5. If we're just taking it at face value.
With the trolley problem.
With the trolley and the surgery problem.
Okay. So in both cases, you don't take action. So the surgeon doesn't harvest organs, and
no, in the surgeon harvests organs, and the trolley driver diverts the track, or diverts the trolley. You kill the 1 person to save 5. In both scenarios.
Okay. Whew. Whew. Okay, that was intense. Everly, why is that so clear to you, even if it's muddled?
It's clear to me only when it isn't muddled. If I muddle it, then it becomes less clear, because I can offer. I found myself thinking over it, just reading it today. Imagine this. imagine if the one person in the trolley problem specifically, the one person is the love of your life, and the 5 people are strangers.
Yeah.
Or the one person is married to one of the 5 people.
Yeah.
Who do you kill then?
Okay, and all of these, well, these permutations, the author of the article goes through them all and tests them all, and that's sort of an interesting part of the process. So the muddling that you're talking about is one of the pieces of this work, right? It's one of the pieces of diving into that situational reality, the gore of the situation, in order to further refine what we think we know. James, what was your...
There's an asymmetry between the two problems.
What's the asymmetry?
The asymmetry is in the classic trolley problem, there's one act that results in 5 deaths, or 1 death. In the surgical composition, there are 5 acts resulting in 5 deaths, or with 1. Wait, I got that backwards.
So in both of them,
Yeah.
we'd be killing one person.
That's right. I had that twisted in my head.
Yeah, I keep
you'd be
twisting
killing
it too.
one person and extracting 5 different sets of organs. Okay.
Yeah, to save
Yeah.
5. But there does seem to be...
There's something different about the
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Wilcox.
Well, for me, the difference is that the quality of what is happening there is important to where it would involve premeditated murder is different than accidental murder.
Why?
It's just that's what it
it.
feels in my head, right? Because there's like that intention to
Okay.
kill.
Okay.
Yeah.
So something about intention.
With the surgical one, you have to seek out the one.
Yeah.
They're not, I mean, in the classic trolley problem, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
And so, but in this
And
surgical one,
it can't
you
be
have to seek out
prevented.
the
Yeah. Colin, did you want to
Well, I
jump
was thinking, it would be an easy choice in the trolley situation to obviously, to me, it makes sense to spare the 5 people's lives and lose 1 life versus 5. But in the other situation, it's like that one person has, it's like, for one part, you're not guaranteed that those 5 people are going to survive if you kill this one person. So that's one part of it. But also, it just doesn't make sense to take a perfectly healthy person and destroy their body just
Why? Why does it?
Yeah.
Oh, Meg's dying to dive
I don't
into.
know.
Yeah. I mean, this is just just doesn't make sense. Why? I don't know.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
My gut tells me doesn't matter. So we're trying to value one life over a life. Do you have to choose? I mean, you see what doesn't matter. Life is life, and no matter who's living it and who's not. I mean, no matter whose
Yeah.
it is, doesn't matter.
So this comes back to last week. We're okay, what is ethics all about? Ethics is about choice, right? Ethics is fundamentally saying, okay, and I love and Molly, I'm not forgetting that you had something to say, but I love the imagery of the trolley problem because it's so perfect. It's that we are humans with our big brains and our huge hearts, right? That we are humans means that we don't just stay on one track. We have the opportunity to switch tracks, right? We can either go on the track, nothing changes, our karma just unfolds, dump, or we can stop, switch tracks, right? So you're saying, well, do we have to choose? And I'm saying, yes, actually you do. You do have to choose. And the trolley experiment is saying that, right? Because it's saying not choosing is choosing, right? Saying I'm not going to do anything, you kill 5 people. I mean, you don't kill 5, the trolley kills 5 people, so maybe that's a distinction. Molly, you were...
I think both of these situations are really tied in with intention.
Yes.
And Wilcox, what you were saying about how this doesn't feel right about the killing a person, or maybe it was James, I don't know. the act of killing is different. But I wanted to bring up with the trolley, like the trolley is already going on the track that is going to kill the 5 people. So like that's just going with what was already
With
laid
what
out.
is.
Or to turn it is like a very decisive, I'm going to do this intention of like I'm going to kill the one person. Not
What's-
going with the flow of what was already
Okay.
laid out.
Does everyone agree with that characterization,
Yeah.
that turning the track is the intention to kill the one person?
Or to
Yeah, I
save
think
5
that's
lives.
an interesting thing here, because now you're adding in like to say, because that's almost like the trolley driver is gonna kill. It is gonna take it's like it like flips the first one, because the trolley driver is making a decision to kill this person. It's not just the trolley now; it's the trolley and the driver that are gonna kill this person to save these 5 people. And so there's an action being taken there, and I almost feel like there's like this. Like, you have to take on that, like, you have to like leave the emotion behind. And this speaks to what Everly was saying with like,
The
all
mother.
right, well, what if it was like your lover who was a person? And for me, like, as much as I'm sure if I were in that situation, it would be really tough to make that decision, you know, leaving like the sentimentality out of it and just seeing that like there's no way to place a hierarchical value on like one life above
That's what
another life.
that's exactly what I was getting at.
So if there's no way to place a
Yeah.
hierarchical value on one life or another, why would you save?
Yeah,
You would
that's
just-
what I was gonna say, is not choosing, you said, was a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't choose to move the trolley, then you're also choosing to save 5, that you're saving 5 lives.
No, if you don't move the trolley, you're killing 5. You're choosing.
No,
to-
I mean, if you, that's what I meant, if you if you turn, you kill 1 person and save 5, right? So that's what I meant that backwards. I meant if you choose to, you can look at it as killing 1, or you can look at it as saving 5,
Okay.
right? Like,
So how is it different with the surgeon? Is the surgeon saying, I'm saving 5 people by killing this one person? Yeah, James?
In that instance, you not only have murder, but you have theft as well.
So, okay, so isn't it, aren't I stealing life every time I murder?
You are stealing life, but in this instance, he's not only stealing
I'm not
life,
stealing
he's
organs.
organs.
Okay, all right, so if you're removing organs, it's really bad. I'm sorry, that's, yeah, please.
I think there are a couple other components that come into this.
Wait, what? Let's listen to Louise. Let's listen to Louise here, guys. Yes.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Oh, okay. I think that in addition to what someone else already mentioned about the uncertainty of the survival of the surgical patients, the transplant patients, we don't know, and there's the element of the ego of the surgeon, and the amount of the certainty that the surgeon has of saving the lives. I think if you regard it as saving 5 lives versus taking 1, you can't get away from the surgeon's ego or confidence in his or her ability to save those lives. And I think that just is a complicating factor. And then on top of that, there's kind of the time for thought versus instinctive reaction. The trolley driver doesn't have any time to I don't know, but they don't have very much time. They have much less time than the surgeon has to think through all of the implications of their action. The surgeon has probably a lot of time to just say that it's an emergency situation. So I think, to me, there's just some of those other complexities.
Okay.
I would, in this case, hope that the surgeon didn't kill the 1 person, because I think there's, to me, too much uncertainty about whether the other people are actually going to live and have good lives
Okay.
after the surgery.
I want to come back to, so one of the things that Louise is drawing out is, again, this quality of intentionality that has to do with our ability, our lives in time, right? Like both the principle that I think, Colin, you were talking about, like the premeditation, or maybe it was James too, that aspect of premeditation, but also the sort of like, I know that my action will save these lives, that kind of ego-based sense of one's capacity. There's something there about time and intentionality. Dawn, what did you?
Yeah, the time element was the one that I was going to bring up too. Is that at least the way it's written for us here,
Yeah.
the surgeon, it's a very intentional act to
Right.
kill this person to supposedly save the lives of the other 5, and the sort of split-second nature of the second example. Where you're just like, it's a total gut reaction. To me, those are very different examples just because of that.
So interestingly, I mean, I think there's compelling weight to everything everyone's saying because I'm seeing a lot of nodding as people are speaking. But what Dawn said just was completely different from what Robert said, who was talking about you got to divorce, gut from head. This has to be, sort of level-headed. And Dawn, you're saying, well, you got to go with your gut, and that's. Somehow you guys ended up in the same place, right? That's kind of interesting.
Well, I don't really see the difference. I honestly don't see the difference in that because for me, my gut says that my emotional attachment to certain things is not like necessarily as valid as I may think it is because that's totally based on my own perception.
Okay.
And my perception is just my own like little reality of it.
Okay. So your gut is not an emotional gut.
I mean, it can be, but I recognize that that it's an aspect of it that has to be considered. I can't just function.
So what is latent, and we'll say more about this in a second, what's latent in this whole discussion, and we have not resolved the trolley problem, okay? That's not the point here. The point here is to notice how we relate to these moments of choice. What do you do? What do you do? This kind of hypothetical work, again, so, it's like a linguist dealing with natural language. None of us learned language the way we learned English or our first language the way we would learn French or whatever, a second language, right? We didn't learn it by learning the rules. Mm-hmm. And yet, linguists can lay out for us the grammar of a language. So this work we're doing is like, well, what actually is governing our behavior? What are the rules here? What is the gut feeling its way toward? And we can maybe educate that gut, to torture that metaphor a little bit. We can teach our gut. So this article written by, I keep forgetting her name, Judith Jarvis Thompson. Such a she was at MIT when she wrote this. It's a very MIT kind of, this very, very logical in all sorts of ways in her dealing with gore. But she's testing a rule. The rule that she's testing is this idea that it is better to, how does she put it? The rule is killing is worse than letting die. That there's something that she's testing this rule that could seem to us like the kind of rule that we might get muddled about. Our gut might be more accurate if we rely on it rather than emotional attachment. This rule of killing is worse than letting die. So she's precisely looking into the role of kind of passive, that it would be worse to, in this premeditated way, to take a life as opposed to, I am going to let this one person die to save these 5, right? The sort of difference in passivity or activity in those. And she's saying, look, the devil lies in the details, because as we drill down into it, it doesn't look so clear. Meg, did you
No,
look
that's
like...
what I was just going to say is you can think about it both ways, right? You're killing one person or you're saving 5 people.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so she says the thesis that killing is worse than letting die cannot be used in any simple mechanical way in order to yield conclusions about abortion, euthanasia, and the distribution of scarce medical resources. I'll tell you, working in the hospital with COVID, unfortunately we didn't ever get here, but there were a lot of the bioethical team in Oregon among the different hospitals and facilities, and actually in the whole Northwest. People were thinking, well, what happens if we run out of ventilators? This stuff is real. Like, if we don't have enough ventilators, who dies? Mm-hmm. How do we make that decision? Fortunately, we didn't have to play it out here, but many, many places did with this pandemic. So she says, that thesis that killing is worse than letting die cannot be used in any simple mechanical way. The cases have to be looked at individually. So the muddle that Everly was describing, or the kind of confusion that might happen that Robert was talking about, like I want to just go with the gut and not get into the place where my attachments cloud my thinking. She's saying, you know what? You can't do this in a simple way. It's gonna get muddled. If nothing else comes out of the preceding discussion, it may, she says, anyway, serve as a reminder of this, that there are circumstances in which, even if it is true that killing is worse than letting die, one may choose to kill instead of letting die. So she's saying, if we've learned nothing, it's like, things are confusing.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is what philosophers can do for us, people. No, I'm saying that tongue in cheek because there is something that gets revealed in this. One of the things that gets revealed in this is that we kind of need a foundation a touchstone that we can go back to in these moments where we can say, right, how do I make this decision? What am I trying to do in my choosing? What is underneath this all? What's my foundation? And there are two really foundational statements in Western discourse about ethics, and handily I put them on the handout. So in that box that says foundation, the first is from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Now, will someone read that first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit, is thought to aim at some good, and for this reason the good has rightly been declared to be that at which all things aim.
Okay, so how is this statement foundational for choices, for making choices? How is this a helpful statement, or how might it lead us? It says the aim of every action is the good.
Mm-hmm. I'm reminded that I've heard it said that there's not a single person who does anything where they don't think that I'm the good guy.
Yeah.
It's just nobody's like, I'm the baddie, in any situation. And that's what it makes me think is that it's all super perception based.
Yeah, subjective to your experiences.
I can tell you without some certainty that is incorrect.
Oh, that there are people who,
Oh, I mean, okay, maybe there's the exception of people who live outside of,
But let's go into because for me, I always want to think through the Marvel universe. But let's say we go into the world of superheroes or thrillers or, the bad guys or Dennis Hopper in Speed. Like, villains, don't they always think they're aiming at the good?
I mean, if their whole thing is the bad,
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Essence.
The classic statement of this in Western literature is Milton's Satan in Paradise Lost, who says literally, evil, be thou my God. Right? So or maybe he says, be thou my good. 1-0 or 2, I can't remember. But same diff, really, right? So he's like, I choose evil. Evil is my good. Right? I mean, what would it mean to have an action that we didn't think of as somehow... Yeah, Mom.
It makes me think of, to go along with your superhero analogy, I think of the Joker, and that was the one that hit the home most with me, because it made it clear that the Joker was a product of their very, very terrible, traumatic, poor circumstances, and that was what created the evil.
Yeah.
He could have had a chance to be somebody completely different, but it was from the circumstances.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm really curious what James has to say.
Yeah, James.
Me too.
James was going there. Okay, yeah, James. Thank you, Robert. James, you are now on the spot to elaborate your last statement, if you care to.
There's a state of mind where one is in such pain that there is nothing other than expressing that by inflicting that pain on others.
Okay.
There is no sense of good. There is no sense of right. There is only acting out through pain.
So in the acting out of pain,
There's no alleviation of pain.
in the acting out of pain, is that individual trying to relieve something? Is something being, Aristotle's point would be, we are trying to get to a place that's better than where we are. Even if we don't have some philosophy of this is good and this is bad. We are striving. His whole point is we strive. We humans strive. We don't just stay on our track. We're continually trying to get on a better track, even if our understanding of what's better is completely racked with torment and is flailing about. So, which is not to dispute the suffering, because what you're,
What we want to believe
yeah,
is that there's always a sense of striving towards good. But there are some situations where evil is done knowing that there is no good in it. Destruction is enacted knowing that it will not benefit the person that is destroyed.
So I hear the intense power of what you're saying and the truth of it. Let me just, without negating that, let me try to untangle that reality from the kind of guidance that the Aristotelian point offers, which is to say that our human destiny as humans is a striving toward something better, not in a cosmic view of there's good and there's evil, and this is the good and this is the bad, not just like this will feel better. Mm-hmm. And if our suffering is such that we can't do anything other than blindly flail, then we're actually not using the full capacity of a human mind and heart. That doesn't mean that what we enact is going to do anything other than create huge suffering in the world, which we may say, I am doing evil. I am doing evil on purpose. But in doing that evil,
you're trying to relieve something.
Yeah. So the reason that this is important is because, and there are lots of ways to argue with Aristotle. This isn't a class on Aristotle, thank God. But I think what he's saying, which is super helpful, is to make sense of intentionality. That insofar as we can formulate a choice, we are striving to improve our situation. That doesn't have to be a moral activity, but it's like removing our hand from fire, right? Trying to improve our position. So where things get muddy, I think, when we think about Aristotle's definition of good, or his invocation of good, is that we want to impose upon it a monotheistic notion of good and evil, which is where the second quote comes in. This is the God in Deuteronomy talking to the Israelites before they make it into right on the cusp of going into the promised land. And he's saying to them, you're about to get all the good stuff. You're going to get your land. You're going to get like flourishing for all of your people. I'm going to gather all of the diaspora into this place. It's going to be great. However, you got to keep my commandments. That's the deal. You become my people. You go steady with me, God. I love how I'm pointing to myself here. You go steady with me, God. And this is what I'm promising you. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. Okay, so this quote gives a grounding that Aristotle is not giving. Aristotle's not saying that we know the good, or that infallibly what it means to be human is that we have access to moral distinctions. He's just saying people strive to improve their lot. If they aren't even striving, then it doesn't make sense to talk about choice. He doesn't think that it's possible, that it makes sense to talk about choosing something, not that we actively know is bad for us, but choosing something that isn't what we want. Aristotle is saying, like, we choose what we want. What we want may be in a box that's filled with crap,
Full of harm, yeah.
full of harm,
Yeah.
but we choose what we want.
Yeah.
The quote from the Bible is saying, okay, you choose what you want. Choose life. Right? How does this anchor, how does this kind of framework anchor choice? What's anchoring the choice here? I'll give you a hint.
I'm left with the question.
Yeah.
2 questions to both of these and sort of muddling them together. What is good and which life?
Yeah. So it's
because there's when I read things like this, it brings me into my I draw from my own experience, my own life. And there have been times where I have wanted to support somebody or to be there for them in a difficult time.
Yeah.
And I set my intention as right as I could and did the best that I thought I was capable of, and still had to walk away eventually because of the level of anger and pain that they were expressing constantly. And it leaves me questioning, what was the good choice in that instance?
okay. So
Whose life did I choose?
So here's where we get, and this is the reason to set this up with the trolley problem and to bring forward Aristotle and this biblical quote. All of these formulations beg us to anchor our notion of what is good, right? We want to say this is good, and this is how I know it's good, right? So it's really when you have a omnipotent being who reveals themselves, right? Then, well, that's awesome. We have, 10 commandments. So one of the ways to think about this, remember last week I talked about these 3 branches of ethics, of normative ethics, of rule-based ethics. And we can look at this quote from the Bible and we can see how it breaks down into all 3 of these. And they sort of overlap and reinforce each other. And they help solve the really devastating problem of suffering and violence and harm that the Aristotle quote can't help. It's like, well, what does it mean if we're just like, I choose what I want and that's me striving? How do I make sense of that? So remember I talked about deontology and a deontological aspect or view of ethics, which is just you follow the rules, duty for duty's sake. So on the one hand, having this monotheistic picture, it's like, well, God says do this. It's the rule. Just follow it. Just do the rule, right? But God isn't just saying follow my rules. God is also saying, and I will make you a prosperous people, and I will lead you into the promised land, and I will gather you together. And so there we come into the branch of ethics called consequentialism, which is like, where we do things toward an end. An action is good, not just because I'm following a rule, but an action is good because the outcome is good. It's like, yeah, that's great. We become a prosperous people. But that may not be good enough, right? Because how do we know that end is good enough? And this part of the Bible where this quote happens is called the Palestinian
and click the donate
covenant.
button at the top
And
of the
as
page.
the Norman Fisher's article alludes to, Israel and Palestine and the whole problem of taking sides. So, there's also a long shadow, right, with that promise that looks very good in Deuteronomy 30 and becomes really problematic in the history of the Middle East in the 20th and 21st century, right? It's not so clear, the goodness of this moment. It's complicated. It becomes tricky in the way that the trolley problem is tricky because sides have been taken. That's the problem about choice. When we make a choice, we take sides. We go down one track and not another. So there's a third part of ethics I talked about in terms of virtue, that what makes an action, and this came up a lot in our talking about the trolley problem, this question of, what's my intention in doing this act? Is the act ethical? Is it a good act? If my intention is good, that makes a difference somehow. Or the action might be ethically good because doing it makes me better. And so that's something else that God is saying to the Israelites. It's like, if you choose life, if you follow my commandments, you will become a godly people. That's a good thing. Okay. Why have I been belaboring all this? How do we anchor our notion of the good without an omnipotent being telling us what's good? How do we do that? Well, Buddhism gives us a way to talk about this. And here's where I want to go now to the precepts. But let me pause before I turn there. Do these moves make sense? And James, did I totally manhandle or woman handle or person handle in a bad way your profound statement?
It wasn't that profound.
Okay. It felt profound at the time. Does this all kind of make sense? You with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, how do we choose? We want to choose the good. What is the good? How do we define it? If we're just going with this feels right, well, what's the good that feels right? How do we measure that? So let's look for a second at just the precepts that are ascribed to Bodhidharma. So I've pulled them out. If you remember on this sheet, the third piece of each of the 10 grave precepts are the kind of commentary by Bodhidharma. They're ascribed to Bodhidharma. Probably they actually appear in the 1200s. So Bodhidharma probably didn't write these. And so let's read these. These are the one-line precepts of Bodhidharma. So they're going through the 10 grave precepts from the standpoint that Bodhidharma gives us. Who wants to? Let's just divvy them up. Can someone? Yeah, Molly, you want to?
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the everlasting Dharma, not giving rise to the view of destroying is the precept of not killing.
Number 2. Someone read number 2. Yeah,
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the unattainable Dharma, not giving rise to the thought of gain is the precept of not stealing.
Number 3.
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the ungilded Dharma, not giving rise to the view of attachment is the precept of not misusing sexuality.
Number 4. Anyone?
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the unexplainable Dharma, not explaining one word is the precept of not speaking falsely.
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the originally pure Dharma, not giving birth to ignorance is the precept of not dealing in intoxicants.
Number 6.
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the faultless Dharma, not discussing faults and sins is the precept of not discussing faults.
Number 7.
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the equitable Dharma, not discussing self and other is the precept of not praising self and criticizing others.
Number 8.
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the pure thusness, all-pervading Dharma, not giving birth to begrudging one thing is the precept of not being stingy with Dharma or wealth.
Number 9. Number 9.
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the selfless Dharma, not planning out the true self is the precept of not being angry.
And number 10. Anyone?
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the one Dharma, not giving rise to the thought of living beings and Buddha is the precept of not disparaging the three treasures.
Yeah, beautiful. So what do you notice about these? These are all, right, they're going through not killing, not stealing, not misusing sexuality. They're going through the 10 grave precepts. But what do we notice? Yeah.
This is the first time I've understood, or it's made sense to me, why it's spoken in the negative. Because there's a sense, what's beautiful about it is that there's a sense that all is well, that there is a oneness, there is a perfection in all of it, and it is only in the adding to it or the subtracting of it that something goes awry.
Yeah, beautiful. It's like the no, or mu. It's in the Heart Sutra. Like this is that negation, right? Where it's how do we talk about emptiness? We say no, my, no. I can never remember. No, I know. Ugh. All that no, right? All that no. Yeah. So what is this oneness that self-nature is inconceivably wondrous?
It seems so personal, like each one of these is just so ridiculously personal.
How so?
The not killing. You know, when you look at that precept, it's so like the mainstream talk about it is like, am I a vegetarian or am I not a vegetarian? And like that's kind of it. And this just like takes it sideways and just spins it off into space, and it's just like, what do you do with it now, man? This is what we're just talking about, like not giving rise to the view of destroying is the precept of not killing.
So what does that mean?
I don't know. What does it mean to you? You know, like that.
Well, no, it has. I mean, this is exactly what, right? This is what we talked about last week with the passage from the Diamond Sutra, right? Not giving rise to the view of destroying is the precept of not killing. You remember that whole Subhuti's question, what do I do? And the Buddha said, you give rise to this thought. You form this intention. However many beings there are in whatever realms of being might exist, whether they are born of the all, right? All, I shall liberate them all. And though I thus liberate countless beings, not a single being is liberated. Why? No one can be called a bodhisattva who creates the perception of a self or creates the perception of a being, a life, or a soul. If we create this sense of separation, right? So one way of expressing not creating a sense of separation is to say, don't create a perception of a self. The other way is to say, not destroying anything, right? Not carving the world into this and that, right? This oneness. So from the standpoint of Bodhidharma, what is each of these precepts, what are they about? That's not a rhetorical question. Robert Aiken says, recalling the language of the first pure precept, and the first pure precept that comes to us with Dogen's commentary, embracing codes and forms. This is the abode of the law of all Buddhas. This is the basis of the law of all Buddhas. So what's the basis of ethical choice? Right? The law of all Buddhas? Robert Aiken says, it's that this depends on that. That's the law. That's the Dharma. What does that mean? He says, let me get his precise quote. Do I have his precise quote? I didn't write it down. It's in his essay on. I probably wrote it down here. It's on page 7 of his essay. He says, the Dharma is the law of the universe, a law that can be expressed simply. One thing depends upon another. Cause leads to effect, which in turn is cause leading to effect in an infinite, dynamic web of endless dimensions. The operation of this law is called karma. The law of all Buddhas, Dharma. This depends on that. What is this oneness that Bodhidharma is seeing in each and every grave precept? What is it? Does that question make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the everlasting Dharma, that's number one. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous. In the unattainable Dharma, that's number two. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the ungilded Dharma. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the inexplicable Dharma or unexplainable Dharma. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the originally pure Dharma. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the faultless Dharma. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the equitable Dharma. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the pure thusness of all-pervading Dharma. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the selfless Dharma. Self-nature is inconceivably wondrous in the one Dharma. In the one Dharma. What is self-nature?
Isn't that like
the truest form of life, right? Like in an interconnected space.
Yeah. A self that isn't a self opposed to an other.
Correct.
the interbeing?
Yeah,
interbeing.
It's all everything.
Yeah, we're talking about the all,
Yeah.
which can't be delimited.
Right.
So at the heart of the grave precepts, articulated in a tenfold way, is this depends on that. Complete interpenetration, complete interbeing, complete radical mutuality. This depends upon that. So from that perspective, right? That's the perspective from which we ground ethical action. From that perspective, how can you destroy life? How can you?
It seems almost impossible.
Right.
Or it is impossible.
So what's wrong? What's wrong with this picture, though? Right? From the perspective of everything interconnected, how can you destroy life? Well, yeah. But now, how is that going to guide me on the trolley, for God's sake, for Buddha's sake?
Does this transcend that, though? I mean, are we looking at basically like a sort of situation where, like there's different there's different like, I don't know. This just doesn't necessarily apply to like if I'm gonna go out and like kill a cow after we leave.
That's what I meant kind of when I first said that. Like, it's bigger than that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So in the one Dharma, not destroying life is the precept of not killing, or I'm messing it up. Not giving rise to the view of destroying. Not even giving rise to the view of destroying is the precept of not killing. Okay, so does that not relate to whether you're a vegetarian or not?
I mean, it totally does. So are we looking at Dogen and we're like, he's like codes and forms?
Well, okay.
And Bodhidharma is like
everything.
But Dogen is saying, okay, so here we come back to Shila, right? To that word that we translate as ethics. Sometimes we translate it as moral conduct. Sometimes we translate it as morality. But we also translate it as discipline. So remember from last week this idea of stop, of the Angulimala moment, like stop, right? So this idea of like, okay, you actually, even if it's a split second, you got to decide, am I going down that track or that track? Or you're the surgeon. You got to decide, am I going to kill this one person to save 5? You got to decide, stop, right? You can't just keep going on because you're human, and so you are formulating intentions all the time. So stop. Embrace codes and forms. What are the codes and forms, though? If they're things like the interbeing of all beings.
Right.
Yeah, Molly.
I think as a human, it allows the interpretation of what you choose to listen to come through. So as far as like, okay, like I'm going to, like I'm a vegetarian, I'm going to choose to kill this thing. But it's, I forgot what I was saying.
Yeah, you're getting, can you say a little bit about how you're getting, to use Everly's great word, muddled here?
Because it seems like the precepts are like, these are these rules that are very easy to follow, clear cut, there it is. But it's not. It's really dependent upon the situation and.
Well, that's where the West leaves us, right? I think. I mean, this is like stupid. I'm like sort of saying the West, it's terrible. Buddhism, yay! Like talk about taking sides, you know, like the ethical thing, which is we have to take sides, we have to choose tracks. So forgive me for caricaturing the entire history of Western metaphysics, but I will do so.
You're amongst friends.
Okay, okay, good. But that's where the West, I mean, this is where at least the article about the trolley problem says, you got to look at the situation. It's situational, and you got to kind of, you know, you try to apply a rule, and then you try to refine the rule, and you think, okay, well, we're all seeking the good, so what's the good here? And am I going to be consequentialist and think that a good action is, you know, defined by its outcome, and then am I going to be a utilitarian and say, well, we should maximize like, how do I define the outcome? Let me think about that. Is it better to save 5 people by sacrificing this one? But now I have to think about virtue ethics. What kind of person would I become if I just took a knife and removed your heart in order to save this person over there? Like, that's clearly not a good action. But wait, what's the rule? The rule is don't kill. Okay, so now, right? That's where Buddhism is doing something a little bit different. It's saying, from the standpoint of one mind, it's all interconnected. So you're not going to be off the hook. The vegetarian example is an interesting one. So I was a vegetarian for a long time. Then I was sort of a vegan for a brief time. That was too hard. And then I just became an omnivore because that was much easier. Okay, is that ethical thinking? No, that was just plain old, I am just going to do what's easy. Which, I mean, is a certain good that I'm maximizing. It's like my husband is an omnivore. There were reasons. Anyway, not a settled issue. What am I doing? And then I'm driving down I-5 just in February through the Central Valley, through the feedlots. Smell of manure, seeing all of these cows in their own filth, and thinking, oh my gosh. And then thinking about all of the water issues in the Central Valley and thinking, well, eating fruits and vegetables, what's that doing? And then seeing all of the Amazon trucks going up and down I-5 and thinking, okay, like our whole economy. It's like this one stretch of I-5, I was like completely ethically eviscerated. Like, how do I, right? But that's what you're talking about, Molly, is that you try to think of a concrete act, and if you go into it, it is everything, right? Yeah. And Buddhism says, yeah, that's right. And it's even bigger than that. And even bigger than that. And even bigger than the bigger than the bigger than that. It's everything through all space and time. Now go out and save all those beings, right? So what do we do? Does this make sense as a formulation? Mm-hmm. So this is where that koan, and maybe we'll just kind of go through this koan for now. Maybe we'll just do something modest. We'll just grapple with one of the gnarliest koans in the koan literature for now. So someone who would like to read for us Nansen's cat. Nansen is the Japanese pronunciation of Nanchuan, and I don't speak Chinese, so if we butcher the Chinese, I won't know. So anyone want to read through this koan for us? It's on the handout.
Nanshuan saw the monks of the eastern and western halls fighting over a cat. Seizing the cat, he told the monks, "If any of you can say a word of Zen, you will save the cat." No one answered. Nanshuan cut the cat in two. That evening, Zhao Zhou returned to the monastery, and Nanshuan told him what had happened. Zhao Zhou removed his sandals, placed them on his head, and walked out. Nanshuan said, "If you had been there, you would have saved the cat."
Okay, let's pause there. So, knowing something, yeah, we're done. Okay, so Nansen is the abbot, is the teacher. Jashu or Zhaozhu is also at this point is a Dharma heir. So these are, teacher and disciple, but they studied together for like 60 years or 40 years, a very long time. Lots of koans feature these two. Lots of respect between them. Okay. So there's this sense of the East, and Norman Fisher goes through this beautifully. So, what I know about this is through people like Norman Fisher. I'm no great expert on the koan literature. But, there's a sense with the East and West halls that we probably have a division here between the monks who spend all their time sitting on their cushions and the monks who are like taking care of the garden, right? Between a kind of contemplative, sheerly contemplative life and a more active life. So this sort of East Hall, contemplative, West Hall, active. And then you got a cat. And I like how Norman Fisher sort of speculates about it. He's like thinking that, that the West Hall active monks are thinking, hey, it's good to have a cat around. They'll be a good mouser. We've got a problem with the little vermin. And that the East Hall are like, having a cat killing mice, that's breaking the precepts. Mm-hmm. So they're being very kind of anchored in the precepts and very theoretical and contemplative as opposed to the more active. And so Nansen comes in as they're arguing about the cat, and he says, "Can any of you speak a word of Zen now, or I'll kill the cat?" Now, why that's a challenge is because of this sense in Zen that there's one mind, and it's inexplicable, and it's unpronounceable. So Bodhidharma, the guy who we've attributed the one mind precepts to, is also famous for, or this is attributed to him as well, for talking about Zen as a special transmission beyond the scriptures, not founded upon words and letters, direct pointing at the mind of man, seeing one's nature and becoming Buddha. This like it's not the finger pointing at the moon is the moon, or it's like that, right? That's enlightenment. So Nansen comes in and says, "Speak a word of Zen." And everyone's like, "Is this a trick? Wait, what do I do?" And he cuts the cat in half. What's going on here? I mean, let's assume that he didn't actually cut the cat in half. Although I actually like it when people say, no, he did. He did actually cut the cat in half, because the cat, from the perspective of Nansen and Joshu, cat's already dead. Mm-hmm. We're all cut in two. Here's the thing. We do have to speak. We do have to act. We do have to decide. Not speaking, not acting, not deciding is itself acting, speaking, deciding. So what do you do? What do you do?
Even though we're cut in half, we're all one.
Well, okay, let's think about that. So Mumon's comment, so this is from the Mumonkan, the Gateless Gate. So the comment in that collection of koans goes this way. Why did Zhaozhu put his sandals on his head? So Zhaozhu comes back and he's like, "Hey, did I miss anything?" And Nansen says, "Yeah, this is what they were doing, and I cut the cat in half." And Zhaozhu puts his sandals on his head. Why did he do that? If you can answer this question, you will understand exactly that Nanchuan's action was not in vain, if not danger. So one interpretation of this is to say that in, China of, the Tang Dynasty, putting your shoes on your head is a sign of mourning.
Yeah.
What sense does that make? How do we understand that? What is Joshu mourning? Is he mourning the cat?
Is it just like the whole situation?
The divisiveness?
Yeah.
It's like,
That Noah could speak a word of Zen. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
all like trying to all learn here and they know nothing. You know?
and that they're trying to be so careful, right?
and then their carefulness, it like didn't.
It's messy.
I think the carefulness is the key word. It's the admittance of humanity, of not being afraid to do nothing, or not being afraid to act, and just accepting whatever mistakes that may come along with it. Just accepting, like, I'm human, I'm going to make mistakes.
Yes.
This might not be right, but at least it's something.
Yes.
Otherwise, I know that that's going to happen. But making an executive decision based on what maybe a gut feeling may be telling you, or some kind of inclination that could be something different.
Yeah.
This reminds me of Echo being like, a lot of people write, like, an enormous amount of people write poetry. So just like, to just do it, you know, and it just kind of makes me feel like, like that if they had spoken, if anybody had said anything, that would have been a word of Zen, perhaps.
And
it seems,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it seems like to show up in the moment as you are, in some way, because I think the mourning, it seems like maybe that it is of the cat in that moment, like what there is to do now. I just think back, like, what I thought there was to do when I was 20, or when I was 30, or when I was 40, has changed over time, even in similar situations, and to show up as you are with the best understanding, with these precepts, with, I don't know, in our humanity, maybe in the situation.
Yeah, beautiful. And dealing with the consequences. So, a life is lost, right? The cat's life here. But also the squandered lives of these monks who can't speak a word of Zen. So this is where repentance arises. We can't not act. And we can't not screw it up. Right? So just one last thing and then we'll end. So Norman Fisher says, like, there are 3 ways to think about the precepts. And I think this is a really useful distinction and something that can help us in our work going forward. He says there's the literal thinking about the precepts. And that's really like the deontological, like, just do the law, right? It's like, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. You know, it's the law, keep it. Don't break it. Then there's the compassionate angle, which is the angle that recognizes interbeing, right? We're all interconnected. And from that perspective, and that's very much what this koan, a big part of this koan is about. From that perspective, you can't keep a precept without breaking a precept. There's no way to choose without taking sides. We will cut the cat no matter what we do. Okay? So the compassionate understanding the precepts is to say, if you're going to keep it, you're actually going to have to break it as well. There's no purity here. You don't get off scot-free, right? Then there's the third aspect, which is the ultimate perspective. And from the ultimate perspective, there's no precept to keep, no precept to break. And that's, if the second one is about compassion, the third one is from the standpoint of wisdom, which is recognizing we're all already dead, the cat's already dead. But we can't just leap to that level and go around killing all the cats, right? We actually have to work with all 3 levels at once, and that's why at the very heart of Buddhist ethics is the notion of practice. There's no way around this, no way to live this without actually living it. All right. So, don't kill any cats in the next week if you can help it. If you do, put your sandals on your head. That's a horrible way to end this class.
It's recorded here.
Yeah, I know, for all posterity. Okay.
Saranam
This and all our teachings are offered free of charge. If you would like to make a donation, please visit our website at buddhaeye.org and click the donate button at the top of the page. Thanks.